We'll wait for 2 minutes. What all parts have been already discussed? Yeah.
So the capacity and something chapter 7 we have to discuss.
Still chapter 7.
Yes, sir. So, good morning, everyone. Today we will be talking about the Mental Healthcare Act, and in this we will be covering from chapters 8 to chapter 16. Talking about chapter 8 first, it talks about State Mental Health Authority. The state authority shall consist of the following chairperson and members. The chairperson will be the secretary or principal secretary in the Department of Health of State Government. Joint secretary in the Department of Health of State Government in charge of mental health will be a member. Then director of health services or medical education, again a member. The joint secretary the joint secretary, member, ex-officer, representatives from the relevant state, government, ministries or department, head of any of the mental hospitals to be nominated by the state government will be another member. Then one eminent psychiatrist from the state not in government service to be nominated by the state government member, and one mental health professional with at least 15 years of experience. Then one psychiatric social worker having again at least 15 years of experience. One clinical psychologist having at least 15 years experience. One mental health nurse again having a 15 years of experience. Then two persons representing persons who have or have had mental illness. Two persons representing caregivers of persons with mental illness, and two persons representing non-governmental organizations. This will constitute of the entire authority. Now, other officers and employment, there shall be a chief executive officer of the state authority, not below the rank of the deputy secretary to the state government. The state authority will determine the number, nature, and categories of other officers and employees required by the state authority in the discharge of its functions. The salaries and allowances payable to employees of the state authority will be specified by the regulations with approval from the state government. What are the functions of the chief executive officer? The day-to-day administration of the state authority, implementing the work programs and decisions, drawing up of a proposal for the state authority's work programs, preparation of the statement of revenue and expenditure, and the execution of the budget of the state authority. The chief executive officer shall submit to the state authority for approval a general report covering all of the activities of the authority in the previous year, programs of work, annual costs for the previous year, and budget for the coming year. He will also have administrative control over the officers and other employees of the state authority. Now, functions of the state authority, they will register all mental health establishments in the state. develop quality and service provision norms for different types of mental health establishments in the state, supervise all mental health establishment in the state, receive complaints about deficiencies in the provision of the services, then register clinical psychologists, mental health nurses, and psychiatric social workers. Train all relevant persons, including the law enforcement officials, mental health professionals, and other health professionals about the provision and implementation of this act. Chapter 9 will be about the finance, accounts, and audit. There shall be a fund called the Central Mental Health Authority Fund, which will be made up of grants and loans made to the authority by central government, all fees and charges received by the authority under this act, all sums received by the authority from other sources as may be decided by the central government. This is the central authority, and they maintain an annual statement of accounts forwarded annual to the central government, which shall be laid before the House of Parliament each year. The accounts of the authority shall be audited by the Controller and Auditor General of India. Now, similarly, there will be a state mental health fund constituted by any grants and loans made to the state authority by the state government, all fees and charges received by the authority under this act, and also all sums received by the state authority from other sources as may be decided upon by the state government. Chapter 10 is about the mental health establishments. The state mental health authority will classify mental health establishments into different categories as specified under the central authority regulations. Now, the state mental health authority will specify the minimal standards for different categories and qualifications of the mental health practitioner to be in accordance with the act. Firstly, registration of the mental health establishment is covered under section 65. Every person, organization who proposes to run or establish our mental health establishments shall register with either the central or the state mental health authority. Now, a question arises, which is whom to apply, where to apply, and what to expect. So firstly, let's answer whom to apply. All the central government mental health establishments to apply to the Central Mental Health Authority in Form B of the Central Mental Health Authority rules with a demand draft of 20,000 drawn in favor of the chairperson payable at New Delhi, and the state government mental health establishment or any non-government mental health establishments to apply similarly to Form B of the State Mental Health Authority with again a demand of 20,000 in favor of the chairperson of that SMHA. When to apply, this is covered under section 66. Every mental health establishment existing on the day of the commencement of the act shall apply for provisional registration within 6 months of the constitution of the authority. Then following the registration, what is it that you're supposed to expect? Within 10 days of provisional registration, the SMHA will issue a provisional registration without any inspection. Then within 45 days, name and details of the mental health establishment will appear on the site. Provisional registration is valid for 10 months. Then renewal has to be done in 30 days of expiry. In case of delay, a renewal fee of 20,000 to be paid by the mental health authority to either the central or the state mental health authority. For now, permanent registration, once rules are laid down for requirement of minimal standards for different mental health establishments, one can apply for a permanent registration. This is valid for 3 years. If authority files objection, it shall give a public notice and display the same on the website. And they will give a period of 30 days to fulfill the obligations. Now the mental health establishment has to comply to this, and the central or the state authority, they have to give a decision within 45 days. And if the compliance is found unacceptable, then the establishment is given 6 months for rectification. Section 67 talks about the audit of mental health establishments. This audit is conducted routinely every 3 years. Then audit fee is of rupees 10,000. Audit team will comprise of a representative of the district collector, a representative of State Human Rights Commission, a psychiatrist in government service, a psychiatrist in private service, a mental health professional who is not a psychiatrist, a representative of an NGO working in the area of the mental health establishment, representatives of the caregivers of the patient with mental illness or organizations representing the caregivers, then representatives of persons who have or had mental illness. Inspection and inquiry of the establishment. If the establishment fails to maintain minimum standards, then if management official of the mental health establishment convicted of any offense under the Mental Health Care Act and violations of right of the patients with mental illness in the mental health establishment. Inspection team will be constituted by a committee of one or more of the following: a psychiatrist in government or private practice, a mental health professional who is not a psychiatrist, a representative of an NGO, again working in the area of the mental health establishment, police officer in charge of the police station in that area, a representative of the district collector. Now, after the audit is completed, the audit needs to be reported within 2 days, and the report needs to be sent to either the central or the state authority. The authority shall communicate themselves to the establishment to suggest suitable changes. If the mental health establishment fails to follow it, cancellation of registration might follow. And if the mental health establishment is aggrieved by any order of the authority, then the refusing or they are refusing registration, they may appeal to the respective high court within 30 days of such an order. Chapter 11 talks about the Mental Health Review Board. This is covered under section 73 to 84. Firstly, section 73 and 74 states that the Mental Health Review Board will be a quasi-judicial board appointed by the state authority. The power of functions of this board are that they will register, review, alter, modify, or cancel advance directive, to appoint a nominated representative, to decide application from a patient with mental illness or nominated representative against the decision of the medical officer or the establishment, to receive and decide applications in respect to non-disclosure of the information, to visit and inspect prisons, seek clarifications from medical officer in charge of health services in such prisons. Now, this will be constituted, this review board will be constituted of a district judge, officer of state judicial services, or a retired district judge who will act as the chairperson, representative of a district collector, 2 members of whom one is a psychiatrist and the other is a medical practitioner, 2 members of either the patient with mental illness, their caregivers, members of organization of this patient with mental illness or their caregivers, at least 1 review board for each district, and if that is not possible, feasible, then 2 to 3 districts shall constitute of 1 review board. Then let's talk about the admission, treatment, and discharge covered in chapter 12 under sections 85 to 99. This describes 4 types of admissions: independent admission in section 86, admission of minor in section 87, supported admission in section 89, and supported admission beyond 30 days under section 90. Firstly, independent admission. The patient with mental illness requests his own admission to medical practitioner. Then he has not to be a minor. Admission only when a medical practitioner establishes that mental illness is severe enough to require admission, or patient will benefit from the admission and the capacity is intact. And also, no treatment is given without the informed consent. Consent of the nominative representative is not required in this. Section 88 talks about that the patient can be discharged at his own will and doctor's permission is not required for discharge. Admission of minor is talked about in section 87. Here, the nominative representative requests the admission. Examination to be conducted independently by either 2 psychiatrists, 1 psychiatrist and 1 medical health practitioner, 1 psychiatrist and 1 medical practitioner. Examination should be conducted on the day of admission. Mental health professional. Examination should be conducted on the day of admission or within 7 days. Now, conditions necessitating the admission under the section 87. The illness needs to be severe enough to require admission. Admission is in the best interest of the minor. There is no other way to fulfill the clinical need. All community alternatives have failed, and there should be a separate facility for minors. must be kept separately from adults in an environment adequate for their developmental needs. In case of minor girls, if the nominative representative is a male, a female nominated representative needs to be appointed by the male. With the informed consent of the nominated representative, the minor should be receiving treatment. Information of admission of minors should be sent to the board within 72 hours. Board has the right to visit and interview minors or review their medical records. The board review is mandatory within 7 days of being informed. And if the nominated representative requests the discharge of a minor, he shall be discharged. Supported admission and subsequent discharge. When the patient with mental illness, the decision-making capacity is compromised, the nominated representative will support the patient with mental illness to make a decision about their admission. Admission needs to be concluded by one psychiatrist, one medical practitioner, or a mental health professional independently. Then examination to be conducted on the day of admission or again within 7 days of admission.
In this, the psychiatrist is not.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
इसमें दो साइकियाट्रिस्ट तो चल जाएंगे ना?
So mental health professional or a medical practitioner, one psychiatrist is needed. So the second mental health professional could.
Two psychiatrists if they then that is sufficient. That's sufficient.
Yes.
Or you will require one non-psychiatrist or one mental health professional. Two psychiatrists. Yeah.
The psychiatrist will come under medical
Very
practitioner.
professional.
The patient should have recently threatened or attempted threatening or is attempting to cause body harm to oneself, recently behaved or is behaving violently towards another person, recently shown the ability to care for oneself to a degree that places the individual at risk of harm to oneself. Then admission under section 89 is limited to 30 days. Review of capacity assessment needs to be done every 7 days and subsequently the admission can be shifted to section 86. If continued lack of capacity is present beyond 30 days, then admission can be continued up to 90 days as per section 90. For the above, two psychiatrists must independently evaluate the patient and admission can then be shifted to section 86. In this, capacity assessment needs to be done every 15 days. In continuation, review the availability of advanced directive.
Capacity assessment needs to be done by two psychiatrists.
Yes.
In all the sections.
Yes.
That is compulsory.
Review of the availability of advanced directive needs to be done at every step. Informed consent of patient with the support of nominated representative. If patient requires 100% support, it needs to be clearly documented and the nominated representative gives an informed consent on behalf of the patient with mental illness. Then when it comes to reporting to the board, in case of women and minor, it needs to be done within 3 days. In case of a male, it needs to be done within 7 days. And when shifting a patient to section 90, it needs to be done within 7 days.
But in section 87, information needs to be given within 7 days. It was written.
Yes.
But minor में आप कह रहे हैं कि 3 days को देना है.
Sir, that is yeah, that is our discrepancy because that will also be supported.
The draft.
Sir, it is in the draft. This is what is in the draft.
But in section 87, they are saying we have exhausted all the options, alternatives, and admission is needed.
So maybe in this section, what they're talking about is an emergency admission.
But it is not emergency, it is supported admission.
So under these conditions, it can be considered as an emergency admission.
Maybe ये हो सकता है कि the suicide, homicide tendencies or risk of harm is very high. Go to the 87. So examination should be, but information to the board should be sent in formalities. 72 hours.
एडमिट कर लिया है हमने ये कुछ करा के एग्जामिनेशन
डिफरेंट एक तो हमने एग्जामिनेशन करके एग्जामिनेशन किया एग्जामिनेशन वाली जब पेशेंट मेडिसिन में एडमिट हुआ है पेशेंट नीड्स टू बी एग्जामिन्ड विद इन 7 days if he is having mental issue. ये और विद इन 7 days on the day of the admission of the 7 days बड़ा इन्होंने विंडो नहीं दी है. अच्छा ठीक है बट है तो माइनर तो 72 आवर्स है. नेक्स्ट स्लाइड
इंफॉर्मेशन 72 आवर्स जाएगी एडमिशन की एग्जामिनेशन
7
करना पड़ेगा विद इन यानी कि 72 आवर्स तक आप एडमिट करके असेस कर सकते हो ये कंडीशंस कि हम लोग को इसको एडमिट करना है कि नहीं करना है. एडमिट आप कर सकते हो. आप कहोगे कि मैंने हमने एडमिट कर लिया और उसका असेसमेंट उसका 3 days 72 आवर्स में आपको दिया तो आप सबमिट कर सकते हो. एग्जामिनेशन कंक्लूड कर लिया हाँ इसको ऐसे टाइप यानी कि मेडिसिन वाले भी एडमिट कर सकते हैं 72 आवर्स साइकियाट्रिस्ट यानी कि हमारे
72 hours में हमें इंफॉर्मेशन बोर्ड तक भेजना इन केस ऑफ माइनर
and
इन
then
सेक्शन 87 एंड 89
आपके में भर्ती कर लिया और हम इवैल्यूएट कर रहा हूं वो विद इन 7
अब वो सब जो एग्जामिनेशन है ये जो एग्जामिनेशन है वो विद इन 7 days वाला करेक्ट है.
sir, they have also mentioned the capacity assessment भी 7 days के अंदर करना है. Then the patient can be shifted in that patient.
That is a different thing. That is in every 7 days you need to do a capacity assessment under 89 and every 15 days under 90 under section 90. That's a different where you need to evaluate it and subsequently report it. My confusion is when you are reporting to the board, that's a fixed duration. When we will report to the board, when we will examine the candidate, then only we will report to the board. When a minor is admitted, under what till what division we need to examine him. What will
7 days.
एग्जामिनेशन शुड बी कंडक्टेड ऑन द डे और
तो किसी ने 5th डे में अगर एग्जामिनेशन किया तो 8th डे में वो बोर्ड को
So it has to be within 7 days.
एडमिट कर लिया हमने पेशेंट वो तो सबके द्वारा चला जाए. देखो हमने एडमिट कर लिया पेशेंट को पॉसिबल है कि ये मतलब क्योंकि इवैल्यूएशन में टाइम लगेगा.
तो व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ एग्जामिनेशन.
एग्जामिनेशन में साइकियाट्रिक इवैल्यूएशन तो अगर सस्पेंशन हो रहा है तो अगर पेशेंट वायलेंट है या पेशेंट सुसाइडल है या आपको ऐसा लग रहा है तो आप एडमिट कर सकते हो.
So this clause is not standing because we are putting the patient in our department. हमारे डिपार्टमेंट में तो day 1 में ही हो गया तो day 3 में आप day 3 तक
So they have written that within 7 days. So if we have assessed the patient on the first day or the second day itself, then within 72 hours we have to send it to the board. So with the examination and the information that we have admitted a minor, these are the examination findings. We can send it
that
within
is better
72
to
hours.
do it within 72 hours of admission or on the day of the admission or evaluation. बड़ी confusing है कि within 7 days क्या है. उनके तो उनके फॉर्म्स हैं फॉर्म्स करके पूरे सपोर्टेड एडमिशन का फॉर्म सब फॉर्म हमारे पास भी प्रिंट आउट्स हैं.
Ma'am, if the that he is a violent and that he has come to the emergency, then according to my understanding, we can first admit him in 89 and then subsequently after capacity assessment of the minor and
कैपेसिटी का तो लेना
the
नहीं
minor nominated representative.
नॉमिनेटेड कैपेसिटी वैसे अच्छा होगा.
एक वॉलंटरी हो गया वॉलंटरी में पेशेंट को एडमिट कर सकते. एक है कि वॉलंटरी है पर वॉलंटरी पेशेंट नहीं कर रहा है. वॉलंटरी मतलब वो कर रहा है कहते हैं नॉमिनेटेड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव कर रहा है. उस केस में हम वैसे एक्सपेक्ट करेंगे कि जहाँ पे चाइल्ड की भी एक असेंट हो कंसेंट ना हो फिर हाँ वो मतलब कि है ना. अब जहाँ पे है ही नहीं वो मतलब पेशेंट ही ऐसा है कि उसको एडमिट करना पड़ रहा है अगेंस्ट सिचुएशन लग रहा है तो फिर वहाँ पर 89 वेरी
87 से चेक करना. अच्छा नेक्स्ट स्लाइड में है सब सीनियर इनफ टू गेट डिपार्टमेंट द पेशेंट इज द माइनर नो वे टू फुलफिल द क्लिनिकल नीड ऑल हैव ऑलरेडी इज अ ठीक. बट जो 89 है
उसमें अलग है.
उसमें है कि सुसाइडल सुसाइडल या सेल्फ हार्म तो वहाँ पे आ जाएगा.
वहाँ पर वो है कि भाई नॉमिनेटेड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव मतलब वहाँ पर प्रॉपर बोल रहे हैं करते हैं.
So the only distinguishing factors between these two will be harm to self and others in 89
in
and
this case suppose if the nominated representative refuses, even then you can admit the patient. That is it.
नहीं सर we have to immediately discharge the patient. देखो दिखाओ
89 में बोल रहा हूँ.
लड़की हो जाएगा
89 में अगर जो है मना करता है उसमें ये है ना कि वो मतलब उसमें कहीं पे है कि आप वो भी बोल सकते हो कि ये उसके इंटरेस्ट में काम नहीं कर रहा है. द बोर्ड में भी रिक्वेस्टेड फॉर अदर यू कैन से रिप्रेजेंटेटिव. उसमें तो ये भी इनबिल्ट है ना कि दैट द कॉस्ट विल बी बोर्न बाय द स्टेट. ये जो सारी ट्रीटमेंट है दैट हैज टू बी गिवन. अगर ऐसा केस होगा तो द वी हैव फैसिलिटी वेयर ऑल द कॉस्ट इफ इट इज बोर्न बाय द स्टेट and we have to admit the patient, then can be admitted against the like patient के capacity नहीं हो तो कर सकते हैं.
But I've still not understood what you mean by examination within 7 days of admission. अगर हमारे पास admission होगा तो we will examine on the first day or second day. 7 days कहाँ? That means some other facility, maybe कहीं emergency में patient है, pediatric में है. Do they mean by that? वो थोड़ा clarify करो. Reporting to board is very clear. They are very clear. कि admission के time within 3 days, within 7 days, they are very clear. नहीं वो they can't admit the patient. If they it's a purely a psychiatric patient diagnosis, they can't admit because that is not a mental establishment. मेंटल establishment तो हमारा वो पॉइजनिंग है तो उनका क्रिटिकलिटी है तो हम लोग एग्जामिनेशन करके आएंगे बट वो एडमिटेड में वही रहेंगे. जो जस्टिफिकेशन ऑफ एडमिशन इज अंडर मेडिसिन. नहीं वो नहीं करना पड़ेगा. वो तो हम जो एडमिट करेंगे नहीं होगा.
प्रॉब्लम ये है कि आरटीए हो गया, आरटीए किसी को एमआई हो गया तो उसको अब एमआई में साइकोटिक हो गई वो मना कर रहा है कि मतलब वो कर देंगे सर.
तो सर वो मेडिसिन में करना पड़ेगा. दे जस्टिफाई. And in 89 and 90, as sir was asking, if nominated representative says no, I will not admit, what will be done?
So in that case, we can always ask the board to intervene and select any other nominated representative.
उनके तो वैसे भी उन्होंने एक सीरीज दे रखी है आउट दिस representative. They only selected. ठीक है.
Then admission can also be extended up to 180 days under section 90. And in section 91, a medical officer or a psychiatrist under his discretion may grant the patient with mental illness leave from the establishment under section 86, 87, 89 or 90. Emergency treatment. Registered medical practitioner can give medical treatment to a patient with mental illness at the establishment or community for a maximum of 72 hours with informed consent of the nominated representative or till the person has been assessed at a mental health establishment, whichever occurs earlier, in order to prevent harm or in order to prevent death or irreversible harm, serious harm to others, self or property. Then electroconvulsive therapy shall not be used as a form to emergency treatment.
Medical बेसिकली जो मेडिसिन वाले या जो भी उन्होंने डेफिनेशन दे रखी है रजिस्टर्ड मेडिकल. So that means by the third day they have to either discharge the patient or have to be
Transferred to
psychiatric consult, and then psychiatrist will inform the mental health board and those things will be taken over if continued admission is required. Emergency treatment.
Emergency
treatment under section 95.
Section 95 talks about a few prohibited treatments: ECT without muscle relaxants and anesthesia, ECT for minors, but if required, the psychiatrist has to take informed consent from the guardian with prior approval from the board. Sterilization of a patient with mental illness when it is intended as a treatment for mental condition. Then chaining of a patient with mental illness in any form whatsoever. Section 96 talks about It restricts psychosurgery of patient with mental illness as treatment. Section 97 talks about use of seclusion and restraint. It is only to be used to prevent imminent harm to self or others undergoing supervision of a medical, under ongoing supervision of medical personnel. Nature of restraint to be immediately recorded with reasons. Physical restraint not to be used for longer period than absolutely necessary. Nominated representatives should be informed about every instance of restraint within a period of 24 hours. Discharge planning, section 98. The discharge planning under this section shall apply to all discharges from a mental health establishment. The treating psychiatrist responsible for the patient with mental illness future treatment in consultation with the patient with mental illness or their nominated representative. The psychiatrist responsible for the person's care shall ensure that a plan is developed as to how treatment or services shall be provided to them. Implications for research is covered under section 99, wherein free and informed consent from all patients with mental illness for participation in any research needs to be taken. If unable to give but does not resist participation, the permission shall be obtained from the concerned state authority. They shall not restrict research-based study of the case notes of a person who is unable to give consent so long as the anonymity of the person is secured. The patient with mental illness or the nominated representative who gives consent may withdraw the consent at any time during the period of the research. Chapter 13 talks about the responsibilities of other agencies covered under sections 100 to 105. It describes the duties of key agencies like police, magistrate, order for admission of the patients with mental illness, prisoners with mental illness, and persons in custodial institutions. Duty of police to take into protection any person believed as having mental illness or wandering in community needs to be moved to a mental health establishment. Medical officer in charge of the establishment is responsible for arranging the assessment of the patient with mental illness. Medical officer in charge or the mental health professional in charge of the establishment, if found that the patient with mental illness does not have mental illness of the nature or degree requiring admission to the establishment, they should inform the police officer who took the patient under their protection. It is also the duty of the police officer to take the person to his residence, and if homeless, then to a government establishment for homeless people. Any patient with mental illness found wandering in the community, an FIR needs to be lodged of a missing person. Then the concerned police officer has the duty to trace his family. Prisoners with mental illness, medical officer in charge of the prison sends quarterly reports to the board that there are or there are not persons with mental illness. If there is no provision for a psychiatric ward in the medical wing of the prison, the person with mental illness can then be transferred to the medical health establishment also, but with prior permission of the board. Medical officer shall make a special report in every 6 months regarding the mental and physical condition of the patient with mental illness to the authority under whose order such person is being detained. Now, if person in charge of the state-run custodial institution feels that anyone has a mental illness, then that person can be transferred to the nearest mental health establishment. The medical officer in charge of the establishment is responsible for assessment of such a patient and treatment to be decided in accordance with the provisions of the Act. A fine of rupees 5 lakh to 50,000 on second contravention. 5,000 to 50,000. Then on the second contravention, 50,000 to 2 lakh, and every subsequent contravention 2 to 5 lakhs. Then any person contravening the provisions of the Act, rupees 10,000 fine or up to 6 month imprisonment or both in case of a first contravention. Subsequently, rupees 50,000 to 2 lakh fine or up to 2 years imprisonment or both. In case knowingly working in an unregistered mental health establishment, a fine of rupees 20,000 will be implicated. Section 16 is the miscellaneous chapter. Here it is talked about under section 110 to 126, and it deals with the locus of power, special provisions for neglected areas, special provisions for decriminalizing suicide, laying of rules and regulations, and some other areas. Then lastly, decriminalizing suicide is discussed under section 115. Then attempt to suicide is a cry for help and it is not a crime. Person who performs a suicidal act is presumed to be suffering from a mental illness, and person should be provided with mental health care and to prevent such a recurrence. This is not punishable under section 309 IPC. This move will enhance reporting of a suicide and aid in seeking psychiatrist help. This will also reduce the legal burden on patients on their families. This brings me to the end of my seminar. This is my reference.
Why this was decriminalized suicide? The reasons you have provided, any other reason? Basically, तभी अगर suicide attempt, जिसने suicide कर लिया वो कर लिया, तो the person has left us. So suicide जो attempt की lethality कम होने के chances होते हैं. But somehow someone knows कि if I attempt to suicide, then I might be held. It might be charged for some legal issues. So person used to actually do a lethal attempt. ताकि बचने का चांस, यहाँ तो एटलीस्ट ये है कि बचने का चांस बच भी गया तो सीधा मेडिकल फैसिलिटी मिल जाएंगे, तो चार्ज नहीं करेंगे. So somehow, but we need to see कि whether Indian suicide rates have reduced or increased after mental health care. And I don't think so. Many people know about this. Still,
but person, if the person survives, also family will not say to the suicide attempt, like this is PDR.
Is the abetment of suicide still a crime? Yes, that is still.
Abetment, you have to understand, abetment is not like the difficult boss and the person who is abetment is where you directly asking him or directly aiding him in suicide. That is why many cases are registered, but they don't really get punished because you have to show that the person's act was the reason why this person has increased the chance of suicide. Someone unknowingly, or teacher is unknowingly, taking tests, failing someone fails an exam and he commits suicide. In that case, the teacher is not committing suicide. But the general population, even the police do not understand, they do file a case. That is a, you can say, legal hassle. But abetment directly means that you know that the person is vulnerable, and the aim is to somehow force him to commit suicide, or consistently harassing the intention of that he will do this.
Yeah, abetment is a very gray area. Sometimes there are people with personality disorder, they will commit suicide. And then they will write in the blame letter, but simple चीजों के लिए suicide note में लिखते जाते हैं. The borderline or some classes. Abetment is a very gray area. Sometimes even innocent people इसमें फंस जाते हैं. Sometimes wicked people नहीं फंसते because of lack of evidence.
So, any questions from anybody regarding this section of that? Have you people read anything about this in the forensic medicine?
Section 115.
Has it made it to your textbooks? आपकी textbooks में आ गया ये mental health? अरे शॉर्ट नोट्स वगैरह पढ़ते हो? नहीं। क्या पढ़ते हो forensic? एडवांस डायरेक्टिव, अबेटमेंट ऑफ सुसाइड कर रहे, सुसाइड, अबेटमेंट ऑफ सुसाइड, सुसाइड अभी हमारी हो सकता है मेडिकल बुक में अभी भी सुसाइड वो इट इज पनिशेबल ऑफेंस.
So that is why these activities are very important because these are current, and your MCQs will be defined by the board, which will not come with the books. They will go with the current literature. Books are outdated 3-4 years. They get revised, so they are outdated. So you need to go through this presentation, and this will help you in a lot of things understanding. The UK, US में होता था advanced directive, which has come up in India now. Very much applied in many states. They have started applying it. Few states they are on the process of applying. Uttarakhand is one of them. They have not started applying it. They are on the process of.
Any questions?
Then after I'm going to apply renewal, during that period, I can able to renew this.
You do have the option of a provisional registration that you can do on the website, which is valid for 30 days. And the board, they have a responsibility to reply to you within 15 to 20 days, and they most usually than not. Or you can always, rather than going ahead with it on the last day of the expiry of registration, you can renewal of the registration can take place before that.
What if the board does not respond in that time?
So then you will always have a written this thing that is.
First, I'm going to, for example, I'm going to, my center time will be entered this month. Example, I'm going to apply scientific certificate, it will be take time because government so after 3 months, 6 months, what should I do?
But this fire certificate is not very like this.
Establishment.
They have given
Biomedical
all these
based.
certificate details.
So,
also.
but for running any establishment, you need to have a certain
Yeah,
exit and fire.
That is under CE. That is the clinical establishment act. So that registration is different than your mental health establishment registration. I think it is written somewhere in the act. If you are registered under CA, you need not register under LSCA. Somewhere it is written controversial. वो भी पढ़ना पड़ेगा.
So ये है कि इसमें 30 days अगर नहीं होता तो then it is deemed that you have been in the पर stipulated time में नहीं आता so you can say that I applied, did not get, so it is like they did not have any objections.
Okay, but someone was already registered in clinical establishment act. They have given some relaxation norms for MSCA. देखना पड़ेगा पढ़ना. So this is totally different context. The line has been taken out. So the context is different now. If the parent of a child applies कि आप admit करिए, तो उसके application के 7 days तक हमें उसका examination करना है और उसको admit करना है. मतलब हम उसके application या उसके request से 7 days ज़्यादा हमको extend नहीं कर सकते if he requires admission. That means they're giving more power to the guardians. गार्जियन ने अगर अप्लाई बोला है तो आपको एडमिट करना ही पड़ेगा if everything is fulfilling as per that section, and after that examination 3 days में आपको बोर्ड को रिपोर्ट करना है.
So what if it is not fulfilling that?
नहीं करेंगे
वो अगर सारे बोले कि admission बिल्कुल भी होना चाहिए,
बिल्कुल होना चाहिए और alternative psychotherapies, exhausted other options, medications नहीं तो फिर
ऐसा नहीं हो सकता ना कि कहीं भी बड़े बच्चे के बोर्ड एग्जाम है उसको कंपल्सरी भर्ती करना है काम बहुत परेशान
नहीं ऐसा होता है. बहुत सारे
What about private sectors? Like, they want to admit
letter apply, we'll put it next day. We'll do the same day of admission.
And psychiatric clinics will also come in touch where there are no admissions.
MH mental health establishments are only where admission
Admission.
clinics will.
They have to maintain the follow
For 2 years, they have to maintain record as per the recent NEMC draft. There are 3 things. And restrainment is every
clinical
restrainment.
research कर लिया है, because we are doing clinical research. एक बार research वाला side बताओ. कि free and informed consent from all person of mental health. ये तो हम करते हैं, ठीक है. If he is not able to give consent, but just participation. So if he is not willing, then you have to take permission from the state authority. In case you are taking, like if you do a case in schizophrenia or something, where the patient may not be, shall not restrict research-based study of the case notes for person unable to give consent, so long as the anonymity of the person is proved. Okay, so you can do research by taking consent from the NR. Right? If we do a study where the person is not able to take consent, we ever do a study on the patient is not able to take consent.
Then ask for least.
If he resists,
NR की बात नहीं करी, इन्होंने सिर्फ unable to take permission from the state authority.
वो है कि if he does not, if unable to give but does not resist, अच्छा participation.
इसमें क्या लिखा है आपने पढ़ा होगा
Yes, sir.
कि whether if permission is not given by the patient, can NR give the permission
Yes, sir.
for research participation?
Yes, sir. So, but according to my understanding, sir, there are मतलब in institutes where जो छोड़ दिया.
Act में लिखा है साफ
So,
साफ.
sir, जहाँ पे जैसे institutionalization होता है, तो in that case we have to take it from the state authority, where we are not provided with the information of an NR or anything. In that case, we have to take. Otherwise, we can take it from the NR.
If the nominated representative is not there, if he is missing, you still have to.
Then it makes sense.
Institutional patient, then you have to take permission from the state authority whether we can conduct any research on them. That makes sense. If the patients are in chronic hospitalization somewhere.
यहाँ लिख देना था ना और institutional doubt है तो कोई डाल देना था तो एकदम easy to.
Like we can do physics on this. We have so we can does not stop us from hospitalization जहाँ होगा hospitalization तो वो criteria होगा hospitalization की voluntary के section क्या वो तो करना ही पड़ेगा. यहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम ये है ना कि अगर MH आदमी नहीं किया तो वहाँ पे psychiatrists are in minority. If you are doing clinical research on placebo, patient of schizophrenia, they will give permission that इसलिए मैंने observation है treatment नहीं हो पर है कि अगर मान लो कि you are say RTMS people norms has psychosis कर रहे हैं and we are giving sham treatment. So how do you explain them that the treatment is continuing, that we are taking care? So it is
जनरली अगर मामला ऐसा नहीं है जाएगा नहीं जाएगा
जाएगा नहीं तो प्रॉब्लम है. वैसे तो ये कि हाँ ठीक है हमने तो वैसे ऐसे डिलीवरी
I
कर
think
दी है.
लोग को exclusion criteria में सब डाल देना चाहिए. If nominated representative is not available, if patient is कोई magistrate ने देख दिया, उसको हम लोग नहीं ले पाएंगे because of उसका insight patient is involved. मतलब हम लोग कहते हैं ना patient is not able to give consent or nominated representative because legally तो now जैसे हम लोगों ने वो भी ऐड कर देना
Alcohol withdrawal and patients.
Asta has to be schizophrenia, Asta, dementia, most of them will not be able to give consent. So they have to also write nominated representative. तब हो सकता है 2-3 महीने में nominated representative का चलन आ जाएगा.
Nominated representative should be present and willing to give consent. ये करना पड़ेगा. So nice presentation. Srinivasan, you are-
For that, I have seen many answers in South India. Putting the right grounds and MBBS for the MBBS completed 10 years working with the but now after this side only those special professors secretaries only deal with the and if someone is violating there is a punishment also.
The medical profession has psychologists, legal workers, and secondary nursing also. They are also mental professionals. You can have note and write a note for admission. If someday everyone falls ill, you can still write a note of admission along with one psychiatrist. Draft it.
go for the state, like state can define a psychiatrist. They are having lack of psychiatrists. In this also we did NMSP था ना, उसमें भी जो mental health program है उसमें एक psychiatrist की requirement. So they themselves came up with this thing. We don't have, nobody was willing to work in Raebareli, Honda, etc. So they defined that we'll train for 6 months. So 6 months. So 6 months, for that 6 months, say MBBS graduate was studying with us, and for 6 months he was trained, and then okay that you are now you can work under nodal officer. So he was based as a medical officer. तो वो तो उनका मेडिकल, वहाँ पे मेडिकल ऑफिसर की पहले ये थी, मेडिकल ऑफिसर की रिक्वायरमेंट थी किसी टाइप जो एनएमएसपी में काम करे. तो उन्होंने कहा कि ये 6 months ट्रेनिंग, तो उसके बाद में ही यूज्ड टू रिपोर्ट टू द नोडल ऑफिसर. कुछ जगह पे साइकियाट्रिस्ट मिल भी गए थे वो पे, पर ज्यादा केस ना हो.
Somebody coming from easily is better option for few patients. Patient बहुत आराम से रहे, एरिया से आ रहा है, easily दे सकते हैं. आइस लोग के लिए कुछ नहीं, पर एलोपैथी लोगों के लिए बहुत difficult है.
Start writing the section also with the admission. जो भी relevant forms है, at least मतलब हम भेजे भले ही नहीं, लेकिन लिखना चालू करें.
क्योंकि एक दिन जब बन जाएगी तो उस दिन अचानक से बहुत बड़ा वो दिक्कत है.
We get acclimatized to the form. Restraint के लिए form, the restraint document करने के लिए and admission. ठीक है, all this. We should start.
We have presented well. Only comment is that for acts, no, we little anancastic approach. So I have to be very pedantic, which I don't have. So I'm not very good with this concept. Sir is there, but the presentation है तो बहुत pedantic होना होता है कि we don't miss out on any, because even in word here and there can shift the meaning in legal acts.
Nice presentation. We have, I think that first time when we heard this presentation, it was like read out all the act. So we have had 2 or 3 presentations on this. We are now at least understanding what is. So what is important, what we do focused on, and there are some other things like in all subjects. So some things are very important, relevant to us for our working, which we need to go inside out. How to admit the patient, okay, and what are the responsibilities where we need to document those cases, what information we need to send to the mental health reports. That part we should be very thorough. What is the constitution of the MHRB? Who will be the secretary? Who will be the president? What money they have to give, from where to where. You need to know, but that you need not be, it will not be a daily.
Yes.
This you need to know inside.
Mental health review board, what it will do, that is not our cup of tea. Our cup of tea, हम नहीं करेंगे.
That part. So there are some things that you must. These are the things that you must. That of course you need to know. For your examination, you can be asked, and you can get a question on the mental health review board, for example. That way you have to learn that. But this thing we need to be thorough, exact what for which patient will come under 86, 89. We need to have exact knowledge of that.
All the forms, Shivani has been abundant. It was sent out, also each form. So today is now, just ensure that every section is given. If section is 86, fine. If 89 or 90, then they have to form. The other format is an attached.
Take it into consideration. This is not something that will leave you after you pass out. Yes, this will be always okay. For example, if you say mentally review board, what it constitutes this limit of it, or you can say after something, examinations, neuroanatomy, it will not follow you, but this will follow you. So you have to be thorough. When you practice, what are the things that you need to document? If you work in an establishment, so you will be called now because psychiatrist is so everywhere, because there are lots of nursing homes who can admit these patients, but they don't employ a psychiatrist. How they, so you will have a better employment opportunities, but you need to be legally thorough. So what patients you can admit, how do you do that needs to be, that information you need to be perfect with form, so that you don't get it very easy.
So all this multi-specialty hospitals then will also register.
Yes,
Yes, whatever is the mental health establishment.
either
Mostly they will not run psychiatric ward. Most.
they
Very
can admit
difficult.
for 3 days, get a consultation, either refer it, or I think that some amount of for like if you need to extend the hospitalization beyond 3 days, some person gets RTA somewhere in India, somewhere he's hospitalized in Google, he's having psychosis also. So
हाँ, तो वहाँ पे justify करके medicine
हाँ।
में ये surgery में भी करा लेते हैं।
हाँ, फिर ऑर्थो में करेंगे तो उसको कर सकते हैं, ऐसा तो कुछ क्लॉज बिल्ड करना पड़ेगा।
सब जब वो ये कहते हैं कि हमारा काम खत्म हो गया, वहाँ से फिर वो काम
वो है कि he can be documentation। हाँ, ये है कि किसी को MI हो गया तो उसको पेशेंट को कार्डियोलॉजिस्ट ट्रीट करेगा।